The year is 1961. The world teeters on the precipice of nuclear war. The United States and the Soviet Union, locked in a global chess match of ideology and power, eye each other with suspicion. In this charged atmosphere, a small island nation just 90 miles off the coast of Florida becomes a focal point of Cold War tensions. Cuba, under the leadership of Fidel Castro, has embraced communism, aligning itself with the Soviet Union. This alliance sends shockwaves through Washington, D.C., raising alarm bells within the Kennedy administration. The proximity of a communist state so close to American shores is deemed unacceptable. The stage is set for a confrontation that will have lasting consequences. The Bay of Pigs invasion, a clandestine attempt by the United States to overthrow the government of Fidel Castro, unfolds against this backdrop of global tension and ideological struggle. This ill-fated operation, launched on April 17, 1961, would become a defining moment in the Cold War, exposing the limits of American power and the complexities of covert operations. The invasion's failure would have far-reaching repercussions, solidifying Castro's grip on power, deepening the rift between the United States and Cuba, and pushing the world closer to the brink of nuclear war during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Bay of Pigs invasion serves as a stark reminder of the human cost of Cold War maneuvering and the unintended consequences of foreign intervention. It is a story of miscalculation, bravery, and betrayal, a cautionary tale etched in the annals of history. The genesis of the Bay of Pigs invasion can be traced back to the halls of power in Washington, D.C., where the newly elected Kennedy administration grappled with the challenge of Fidel Castro's Cuba. The young president and his advisors were eager to make a decisive move against the communist threat so close to American shores. The Eisenhower administration, before leaving office, had given its blessing to a covert operation aimed at toppling Castro's regime. This operation was seen as a necessary step to curb the spread of communism in the Western Hemisphere. This plan, shrouded in secrecy and given the codename Operation Pluto, was entrusted to the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA. The agency, known for its clandestine operations, was tasked with executing this high-stakes mission. The CIA, operating with a degree of autonomy, began to lay the groundwork for an invasion, recruiting Cuban exiles, training them in the art of warfare, and gathering intelligence on the island nation. These exiles were motivated by a deep desire to reclaim their homeland from Castro's grip. At the heart of Operation Pluto was the belief that a small, well-trained force of Cuban exiles, backed by American air power, could successfully overthrow Castro's government. This belief was bolstered by the assumption that the Cuban military would be caught off guard. This belief rested on several assumptions, many of which would prove to be fatally flawed. The planners were confident that their strategy would lead to a swift victory. The CIA, confident in its intelligence-gathering capabilities, underestimated the level of popular support for Castro within Cuba. They failed to grasp the depth of loyalty that many Cubans felt towards their leader. They also overestimated the willingness of the Cuban people to rise up against Castro and embrace a U.S.-backed invasion force. The reality on the ground was far more complex and nuanced than the CIA had anticipated. The plan called for the Cuban Exile Force, dubbed Brigade 2506, to land at the Bay of Pigs, a remote stretch of coastline on Cuba's southern shore. This location was chosen for its strategic advantages. The choice of the Bay of Pigs was based on its suitability for an amphibious landing and its proximity to the Escambray Mountains, where anti-Castro guerrilla fighters were believed to be operating. The rugged terrain was thought to provide a natural stronghold for the exiles. The invasion, the CIA reasoned, would spark a popular uprising against Castro, leading to the swift collapse of his government. They envisioned a domino effect that would quickly topple the communist regime. The stage was set for a high-stakes gamble, one that would have far-reaching consequences. The outcome of this bold move would shape U.S. Cuban relations for decades to come. Far from the shores of their homeland, a group of Cuban exiles underwent rigorous training in the art of warfare. These men, driven by a shared hatred of Castro and a longing to liberate their country, made up Brigade 2506, the invasion force tasked with carrying out Operation Pluto. Recruited from the ranks of Cuban refugees who had fled to the United States after Castro's rise to power, Brigade 2506 represented a cross-section of Cuban society. They were doctors, lawyers, teachers, and students, united by their opposition to Castro's communist regime. The CIA, operating under a veil of secrecy, established training camps in Guatemala and Panama, far from the prying eyes of the media and the American public. Here, the exiles received training in a variety of military disciplines, including weapons handling, small unit tactics, demolition, and amphibious assault. The training was demanding, designed to forge the exiles into a cohesive fighting force capable of taking on Castro's army. The exiles, eager to reclaim their homeland, endured the grueling training regimen with determination and resolve. The CIA trainers, veterans of World War II and the Korean War, instilled in the exiles a sense of purpose and a belief in the righteousness of their cause. The exiles were told that their invasion would be the spark that ignited a popular uprising against Castro, that the Cuban people were waiting for their liberation. The exiles, fueled by patriotism and a thirst for vengeance, embraced this narrative, unaware of the complex realities that awaited them on the shores of their homeland. Section 4. The Bay of Pigs, a beachhead drowned in miscalculation. The invasion commenced under a shroud of secrecy in the pre-dawn hours of April 17, 1961. Brigade 2506, aboard a flotilla of aging freighters and landing craft, approached the beaches of the Bay of Pigs, their hearts pounding with a mixture of trepidation and anticipation. The plan called for a swift and decisive assault, a lightning strike that would decapitate Castro's regime and spark a popular uprising. However, from the outset, the invasion was plagued by miscalculations, logistical blunders, and a fatal underestimation of Castro's forces. The landing itself was botched. One of the ships, laden with essential supplies and ammunition, ran aground on the coral reefs that fringed the coastline. The element of surprise, crucial for the success of the operation, was lost when Castro's forces, alerted to the invasion, were waiting for them on the beaches. Instead of encountering a demoralized and ill-equipped militia, Brigade 2506 faced a determined enemy, dug in and ready to defend their revolution. The initial assault faltered, bogged down by fierce resistance and hampered by a lack of heavy weapons and air support. The Cuban Air Force, though small, proved to be a formidable opponent, strafing the invaders with rockets and machine gun fire. The exiles, outnumbered and outgunned, fought with tenacity and courage, but their valiant efforts were not enough to turn the tide of the battle. The invasion, conceived in secrecy and executed with a flawed understanding of the realities on the ground, began to unravel almost as soon as it began. Desperate radio calls for reinforcements went unanswered as the promised air support failed to materialize, leaving the invaders isolated and vulnerable. Cuban forces, emboldened by their early successes, launched counterattacks that further disoriented and demoralized the invaders. In the final moments of the battle, the remnants of Brigade 2506 were forced to retreat, their dreams of liberation shattered by the harsh reality of their miscalculated endeavor. Section 5. Air support failure, crippling the invasion from above. Crucial to the success of the Bay of Pigs invasion was the element of air superiority, the ability to control the skies above the battlefield. Without this control, the entire operation was at risk. The CIA, in its planning, had envisioned a series of airstrikes that would cripple Castro's Air Force and pave the way for a successful landing by Brigade 2506. These airstrikes were seen as the linchpin of the invasion strategy. However, this crucial aspect of the operation was mismanaged from the start, hampered by indecision, poor communication, and a fear of revealing the United States' direct involvement in the invasion. The lack of coordination and clear directives led to a series of blunders. The initial plan called for a pre-invasion bombing campaign carried out by Cuban exile pilots flying American-supplied B-26 bombers. These pilots were highly motivated and trained, ready to strike a decisive blow. These airstrikes were intended to destroy Castro's small but potent air force on the ground, giving the exiles air superiority during the crucial landing phase. The success of these strikes was vital for the overall mission. However, due to concerns about provoking an international outcry and revealing the U.S.'s hand in the invasion, President Kennedy made the fateful decision to scale back the initial airstrikes. This decision would have far-reaching consequences. The first wave of airstrikes, carried out on April 15, 1961, 2 days before the invasion, was limited in scope and failed to achieve its objective of destroying Castro's air force. The limited strikes left much of Castro's air power intact. The Cuban exile pilots, flying outdated B-26 bombers, faced stiff resistance from Cuban anti-aircraft defenses and were unable to inflict significant damage on Castro's airfields. The anti-aircraft defenses were more formidable than anticipated. The failure of these initial airstrikes had a cascading effect on the invasion, leaving Brigade 2506 vulnerable to attack from the air. Without air superiority, the brigade was exposed to relentless aerial assaults. As the invasion faltered and the exiles found themselves pinned down on the beaches, desperate pleas for air support went unanswered. The lack of air cover left them sitting ducks for Castro's forces. President Kennedy, fearing a wider war and unwilling to risk Soviet retaliation, refused to authorize further airstrikes. His caution, while understandable, sealed the fate of the invasion. The Cuban exile pilots, their planes grounded, could only watch in frustration and despair as their comrades in arms fought and died on the beaches below. Their hopes of liberation dashed against the rocks of indecision and miscalculation. The dream of a free Cuba was shattered, at least for the moment.